Hello, and welcome back to the Arcane Forge. My name's Josh, and welcome back to another Monster Monday as well, a series where I draw a creature from D&D and I talk about its lore and its mythology and what it's like to fight in-game. Traditionally, what I like to do with these videos is ask for your suggestions of monsters that you'd like to see, whether they're classic monsters from D&D or from some similar role-playing game that you think would fit really well in D&D, or take it from the other perspective and start with mythology, work our way backwards and create a monster that we can use in D&D. And for today's video, we've kind of gone a little bit weirder. But if there is a creature that you really love from D&D that you'd love to see me draw, love to hear me talk about, love to see me make a video about, make sure to leave that down below in the comment section, because I can add it to my to-draw list, which my Patreons vote on every single month to determine which videos come up when. In the meantime though, this video was inspired by the fact that I have done a griffin video, a hippogriff video, and sort of mused on the idea of the word hippo in hippogriff, something that you guys latched onto in a massive way, and you wanted to see a hippo griffin, a hippopotamus griffin, and I love the idea of that, so I naturally had to homebrew something. So today I'm going to be taking you through the lore, mythology, and stats of this free homebrew monster. There should be stats below in my description box and on my website for this creature, and I'll talk to you about what it was like to design and how the Griffopotamus, as I'm calling it, can fit neatly into your campaign world. But for now, it's way too hot here right now for me to be under studio lights any longer, so let's get started with today's video. So the Griffopotamus, a word that, now that I'm saying it out loud rather than just writing it down, is probably something that I'm going to stumble over a few times during this video. So either I'm going to edit those out, or you're going to find me struggling to say Griffopotamus a few times, or slowing down. Either way, the Griffopotamus. It's a homebrew creature that you can find down below in my description box, on my website, and so on. It's on D&D Beyond, totally for free, that I've created entirely for this video, and what has inspired that is, I've covered the Griffin, I've covered the hippogriff, and during the hippogriff video, I kind of brought up the weirdness of the phrase hippo meaning horse. Because for those who have not watched those videos, griffin is a fusion of an eagle, usually some kind of predatory bird, and a large cat, like a lion traditionally. A hippogriff is a slightly tamer version, a fusion between a horse and some sort of bird of prey, which traditionally in fantasy media and in terms of original mythology was basically a creature that was supposed to be a tamer version of a griffin that was specifically designed to be a mount. It was designed to be ridden into war and so on. And the phrase hippo in hippogriff means horse. In fact, hippopotamus literally means water horse. And so I kind of jested that we're lucky that basically a hippogriff isn't an hippo and a griffin kind of fused together, because hippos are incredibly deadly creatures. And I mused that perhaps this would be a Monster Monday for another day, an opportunity that you guys absolutely jumped on in the comment section, rocketing this to the top of the Monster Monday list. I handed that over to my patrons, and they showered the idea of a hippopotamus griffin with love. So here we are. This is us making a hippopotamus griffin, which rather than calling it a hippo griffin, because that's going to be really hard to differentiate between that and the hippogriff, I've decided to call this a Griffopotamus. So one of the reasons why I wanted to do this and why I thought they would be incredibly deadly is that griffins obviously are seen as quite deadly creatures. We all want to ride a griffin because that would be really, really intensely cool, but I keep mentioning that like city guards would be terribly nervous. And while not utterly unheard of, it would be the equivalent to bringing a kind of dire wolf or a fully grown adult lion into a city, Imagine wandering down your city street and seeing someone just walking a lion casually without any kind of lead or harness or anything like that. You're not at the zoo, you're not in a wildlife reserve, this is just in your day-to-day life. I think you would panic, maybe be excited, maybe want to go and say hi to the lion, but ultimately you would feel more uncomfortable than someone just walking a dog. A hippogriff, on the other hand, is sort of given the same sort of in-game sensation, the same sort of feeling and atmosphere as if someone was walking down the street with a very unique and interesting horse, fundamentally. They're raised and bred specifically for the purpose of being companion animals and mounts to ride. So they might be really exotic and really strange looking, but you'd probably approach them with a similar level of care and a similar level of reverence as you would see someone, driving down the street in a horse and carriage. A little bit peculiar, a little bit weird, but ultimately nothing to be ultimately threatened by. But a winged hippo, definitely not. Hippos often are underestimated because they are chubby, round, quite cute looking creatures. But next to things like bacteria, viruses, mosquitoes, and things like that, I've seen debated figures, but hippos are certainly within the top 5, let's say, maybe being conservative, top 10 animal-related deaths on our planet every single year. When I first started making this video, I was fairly confident that they were the number 1 source of animal-related deaths in the world. But when you factor in things like malaria, it's hard to comprehend. Either way, they're incredibly strong creatures, and they're immensely volatile. Despite being herbivorous, they only eat plant matter. They gather in massive groups. They are incredibly strong. I'm sure we've all seen the video of a hippopotamus being thrown a watermelon into its mouth and crushing it with a single flap of its mouth. Not even a crunch, just upon closing its mouth, the watermelon dissipates into dust, basically. But they feel very, very threatened whenever someone gets too close, and the radius of what they consider close is incredibly large. And while there's not a clear consensus on the overall mortality rate annually from hippopotamus attacks, because they tend to not leave much in the way of remains afterwards, it is estimated that it's somewhere between 500 and 3,000 deaths per year. And that's not just plain attacks, that's mortality from attacks, and they are incredibly deadly. They're the 3rd largest land mammal. They're capable of running easily 48 kilometers per hour, which is roughly speaking 30 miles an hour. It's said that the only way to outrun one of these creatures is to try and do a little serpentine movement, because they're so heavy that their turning circle is wider than yours is. So you're very likely to be able to, or at least marginally more likely, I should say, be able to escape the ire of a hippopotamus if you run in a sort of zigzag. But in a flat foot race, it's extraordinarily unlikely that you're going to escape unscathed. Although they sort of superficially resemble pigs, you can kind of picture some sort of hog or wild boar fattened up and sort of plumped around the edges. They're not actually related to pigs. There was one relative of the hippopotamus that looked quite swine-like, and they went by the name of hell pig, which were these massive sort of 7 to 10 foot creatures, 7 feet reaching their shoulder. They were omnivorous and lived during the early Miocene sort of period, about 37 million years ago. But they fit the sort of evolutionary niche of a wolf, although, about like a 10-foot tall wolf that would gallop. The closest living relatives to hippopotami are the cetaceans, so whales and dolphins and porpoises and so on. But unlike them, hippopotami don't actually swim, which I found as a very peculiar revelation, because I've seen videos of them sort of charging through the water, bouncing up and down, sort of like someone doing a butterfly stroke, trying to chase after a riverboat that looked like an angry elephant approaching the speed of a speedboat through the water. And that's sort of the crux of these guys. They do this amazing thing where they tend to live in shallow water, and they use their weight as an advantage. They tend to dwell in water that's just shallow enough to completely submerge their bodies, but only by a foot or two. So they're very close to the surface. They can hold their breath for about 7 to 10 minutes. They have especially adapted ear canals and throats, so that when they go underwater they automatically seal these off, so they still remain filled with air and they're able to communicate through echolocation with each other. It sounds incredibly like a whale or a dolphin clicking. And then, using the water's natural buoyancy, they find themselves semi-frictionless on the river bed, and then they will just gallop across the river's floor, basically, no longer slowed down by the pressure of gravity and the friction out on dry land, and they essentially torpedo themselves through the water to eliminate any threats. So I wanted to include some element of this into the Griffopotamus. Hello, I'm sorry to interrupt, and I'll be as quick as I can. I wanted to take this opportunity to ask for your help and to thank those who are already helping me. I absolutely love what I get to do here, but it is very tough. It takes a massive amount of time. It is in itself basically a full-time job. Whether I'm researching monsters, which takes days at a time, sifting through books and pages of the internet, spending days illustrating monsters, recording, painstakingly editing both the audio and video for these things, managing social media accounts and so on. Basically, it's a passion project and it takes up a lot of time, and while I don't demand your help, it would be wonderful if you appreciate these videos, if you could. Now that could just be hitting the subscribe button. I know that 50% of the people who watch my videos aren't subscribed, and it's a massive, massive morale boost. I can't even tell you how much when that subscriber count increases. We've been on 15,000 subscribers for about a year, and I've always dreamed of this channel reaching 100,000. I really appreciate all of you who are watching right now and who are subscribed, but to call this channel's rise from obscurity meteoric would only count if the meteor was being dragged through a beach of gravel by a very determined, but also very slow halfling. So I'd appreciate your help. If you don't want to miss any of the videos, just subscribing, because it's a massive boost. Further to that, my patrons over on Patreon actually help to fund these videos. As I say, I basically spend the equivalent time of a full-time job on this, and these guys are what literally keeps the light on in my house, helps to pay my bills, helps to feed me, my wife, and our adorable little pup Myrtle, helps to pay for the drawing software that I get to draw, pays for the internet that allows me to research all these monsters, pays for drawing tablets so I can actually illustrate things. So if you'd be kind enough to check out my Patreon, I would really appreciate it. At the moment there are 4 pledge levels. There's the Copper Fiend pledge level, who for £1 or $1.50 I think it is per month, get a shout out on my live stream that I do at the end of every month. You get to thank each and every single one of them. Every single person at this pledge level and above also gets entered into a Commission Corner raffle, so I pick one person at random every single month who's on my Patreon list to get a full character illustration, and they will get to vote on polls to determine what Monster Mondays come up next, and other tricky decisions that I can't decide, like what t-shirt to do next, what player species to illustrate next, and so on. They really get to have a driving seat in how this channel is run and what content I get to make. At £5 or $7.50 a month, there are the Silver Archfey, who get everything that the Copper Fiends get. They get access to Patreon exclusive videos where I talk about my world lore, talk about my adventures and my campaigns, and anything else that they'd like to see. But they get an extra video more than people who are on YouTube every single month, and they get a shout out each month on my Monster Monday videos. And this month they are Nicholas G. Silver, Duck Quack, George Punton, Nappin Camo, Yorick Beese, Jonathan Foster, Benjamin Colburn, The Smiling Sadist, Ethan Dibby, Skyrush Soul, Nathan Stratton, Amanda and Jake Westfall, Xavier Heatherwick, Braxton Hudson, Bartlegruff the Great, Healthy Wolf, Peter Belf, Max Schluter, Ryan H., Tim Kleemer, Steve Harrison, Dan Waterman, Styrax, It's Just Avi, Colby Monroe, Sam Hickson, Brandon Kerr, Darth Caetana, Trevor Traub, Max Copeland, Oliver Thorvald Mellock, AJ, Dominique Jolly, Tamerling, Aldrin, Christian Palmer Smith, Jellypig, Raptor Dio, Brandon Wilkinson, Nicholas Bayer. At £20 or $29 I believe it is, the Golden Celestial Pledge get everything that's come before, and they also get digital prints of all of my illustrations that I do each month for every video. So they get a whole cluster of illustrations every month. And finally the great old ones at £50 per month, or roughly $71, get access to everything that's come before, and we get to have a one-on-one chat each month, where either we just shoot the breeze, talk about campaign ideas, homebrew some things, workshop ideas, or I can share my screen and make personal illustrations just for you while we chat. So thank you so much if you choose to do that, if you choose to check out my Patreon, or even just subscribe. Like I say, it really keeps me going, and I'm really thankful for all of your help in getting to do this literal dream job. But I think I've talked for long enough. Hopefully I've not disturbed your interest in the video otherwise, so I'll let you get back to it, and thank you very much. It'd be easier to make a bit of a joke out of a creature that is, very chubby looking and quite cute really, but they're absolutely monstrous. So I thought, what would a kind of griffin version of this be? What would they seem like? And I thought, for the purposes of D&D, it would be really interesting if they filled another niche, if they weren't just an alternative to a griffin or an alternative to a hippogriff. So I thought they could be the griffins of the oceans. I thought instead of necessarily having wings per se, I could meld two creatures together, as is usually the case with a griffin of some kind, with the hippo being the main body part of this, but then looking at things like stingrays or manta rays to give this creature its so-called wings, or in this case, pectoral fins. I thought, how deadly would a more predatory version of a hippo be if instead of having to rely on this shallow water, they could instead swim, essentially flying through the water, and having them treated as something akin to the griffins that tritons might want to ride, and have the same sort of mythology around that land-dwelling creatures have for conventional griffins. The Griffopotamus could be the sort of aquatic equivalent that, sea elves and tritons and things like that would be terrified of, but also admire, and so on. So that's kind of what I came up with here. I said that a Griffopotamus is the monstrous fusion of several creatures, likely created by some truly cruel wizard whose reasons have long since been lost to time. What little is known of their origin seems to point towards confusion surrounding a transmutation or summoning spell and a desire to magically produce hippogriffs. Superficially resembling a hippopotamus in frame and stature, the Griffopotamus has the gills, pectoral fins, and tail of a stingray or manta ray, making them deadly beasts in deep or shallow waters. Now, I decided to go for the tail of a stingray or a manta ray here because I was playing around with the design of a Griffopotamus in my head, and I really liked the idea of using some manta ray-like features. The pectoral fins work fantastically in place of wings. The gills look great on this kind of hippopotamus-like frame. Even their sort of eyes, these little sort of folded mouth segments, these mandibular fins, look really great in place of a hippopotamus's sort of little tiny flappy ears. But what did not look very good is adding claws or talons to the hippopotamus body. So I decided that having this really long sting as a part of its attack routine instead of claws would work much better. So, like most griffins, I gave it a multi-attack where it uses its bite and traditionally a claw, but in this case a bite and a sting. And I really wanted to make the hippopotamus bite attack something absolutely horrendous to deal with. So I actually looked at crocodiles and alligators in the monster manual for a kind of reference here. I gave it a d10 plus 4 piercing damage bite attack, but in addition to that, targets need to escape being grappled. So they could be potentially dragged under the water and drowned. And their sting is a 2d6 damage, or 2d6 plus 4, piercing damage attack they get to make as well. You could potentially add some poison damage to that as well, but I didn't think it was necessary. I suppose that's up to you if you choose to use this creature in your game. I said that while more traditional griffins and hippogriffs are famously flying predators and scavengers, the Griffopotamus is far too heavy to fly at similar speeds to their more agile kin. They are very capable of lifting their massive bodies into the air, but mostly choose to glide or cushion their landings from great heights. To this extent, I gave it a galloping speed of 40 feet so that it could outrun you, a flying speed of 40 feet, so there's no great advantage to it taking flight, but where this thing is really deadly is that it gets a griffin's equivalent speed of flight, but underwater, so it has an 80-foot swimming speed. I said where their wings or pectoral fins truly come into their own, it's underwater. Hippos are not naturally capable of swimming. Instead, they stick to shallow waters and submerge themselves, bouncing elegantly and weightlessly on the bottoms of rivers. Here, they use their reduced friction to charge at alarming speeds to track down and demolish any creatures who they deem a threat. The Griffopotamus has no such limitations, and as such, uses its enormous fin span to drive through rivers or oceans at speeds that would outshine their other griffin cousins in the air. Now, a really key part of a hippopotamus's sort of attack pattern is their ability to smash into things, use their body's weight as essentially a massive battering ram. They charge at people, smash into them, and then absolutely destroy their bones using their bite attack. And so I looked to centaurs and other galloping, charging creatures for reference here, and I came up with the following. They have an ability, not a move, but an ability called Trampling Charge, which says that if the Griffopotamus moves at least 20 feet straight forwards towards a creature and then hits them with a bite attack on the same turn, the target takes an extra 3d6 piercing damage to simulate this absolute train of an animal charging into you. So you could potentially do the multi-attack with this bite, and as long as you've moved towards someone, imagine them gliding through the water like a bullet, absolutely sort of peeling their fins down towards themselves, becoming almost like a torpedo in the water, and opening with this absolutely body-crushing attack and following up with a sting attack, perhaps on a nearby creature. I have kept these creatures as herbivores. I said that hippopotami are herbivorous in nature, and rays are largely filter feeders, yet both can be incredibly deadly, and in their fusion, the Griffopotamus is one of the deadliest non-meat-eating creatures adventurers are likely to come across. Griffopotami subsist mostly on seagrasses, seaweed, and other long rushes that grow around bodies of water, but their enormous strength, coupled with the fact that they are fiercely territorial, protective, and generally aggressive, means that they are responsible for an enormous number of marine deaths. Mostly, they're famous for breaking the bodies of tritons, sea elves, and sahuagin who venture too close to their territory during mating season. Now, owing to the fact that they have gills, I made sure to make this creature amphibious so it can breathe air and water. Initially, in my sort of early designs, I had kept a hippopotamus's ability to hold their breath, much like a whale or something like that, but being a fusion of a fully aquatic creature, I felt like it was fair to make this creature not need to come up for air, even though it's very capable of living on land as well. Now, I made this thing a challenge rating 3, which puts it in the same sort of ballpark as a conventional griffin. I think it's slightly more difficult, mostly because of this trampling charge ability, and they're slightly stronger, being strength 19, but otherwise they're largely the same. I gave them a tremor sense at 120 feet, so they can have this kind of echolocation when underwater, and I specifically said that they needed to be submerged in order to use this echolocate tremor sense ability. I kept the hit points largely the same, being 8d12 plus 24, averaging out at 76, I believe, but then my maths is terrible, so you can tell me whether or not that's right. And the armor class is the only thing that I'm a tiny bit iffy about. I looked at other similar animals in the monster manual. I didn't want to make this thing supernaturally tough, but then a hippopotamus is an incredibly tough and strong creature. It's something that, with these kind of layers of blubber and huge amounts of muscle mass, they're pretty hard to harm. And I wanted to, say, give this creature an armor class of 15, let's say, but then when I was looking through the monster manual, I noticed that an elephant, a fully grown elephant, only has an armor class of 12, because after all, it is flesh, not sort of natural armor, and I thought that it would be dumb of me to make this thing more impervious to harm than an elephant. An elephant has very, very similar thickness of skin, they're also incredibly tough, they're also incredibly strong, very capable of shrugging off injury, so it seemed fair to me to make this thing an armor class 12 as well. You might disagree, maybe when you use this creature in your game you might increase or decrease its armor class, but that seemed fair to me, having the same armor class as an elephant. So yeah, I hope you enjoyed the Griffopotamus today, sort of rounding off our general griffin theme, and I hope you use it in your campaigns as well. Make sure to save this video, add it to your favorites list so you can come back to this in future. As I say, the stats for this creature are absolutely free. They're on D&D Beyond if you want to use this in your game, and there's a link down below in my description box or on my website. But until next time, I hope you have a wonderful week of adventuring. I hope you steer clear of the fearsome Griffopotamus or any regular hippopotami during their mating season, or in general, to be perfectly honest. And until I see you next time, happy monster hunting.